financial challenges, health issues, fear of missing out, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. The list of fears goes on, and that's what we're tackling today on Women of Excellence.
Being a woman is tough. Women of Excellence with Janae Hill encourages, equips, and empowers women with real solutions to real issues. From business to family, to health and relationships, work-life balance. If women face it, we address it with heart, humor, and a hands-on approach. Women of Excellence, where laughter meets tough love as we do life together.
Fear is defined as a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain, etc., whether the threat is real or imagined. For many, fear can be paralyzing and debilitating, and for others, fear can impact us in ways that we don't even realize that we are actually afraid. Hi, I'm Janae Hill, your host of Women of Excellence, where we talk about real issues so that we can find real solutions. And today we're tackling fear. Now, I will say this is a big topic that is going to take much more than one episode, but we're going to scratch the surface today. We've got Tracy Payton Watson. She's a licensed professional counselor, and she's had a recent firsthand experience with fear as she was battling pancreatic cancer. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We are so glad you're here on many levels, just thankful that you are alive and a survivor.
That's right.
Yes. So when you think fear, what do you think of?
Well, when I first think of fear, I think, what typical people would think of is, oh my goodness, a health issue or something has happened to my children or a family member or husband or something. But in these current days,
crazy times,
it's the coronavirus.
Yep.
But the big C, the cancer, viruses, that kind of things. It's really anything that you cannot control.
That would be a lot of things.
Yes, and we do love control.
Yes.
I'm speaking for me personally.
I do too. You're not the only one. And so when you say anything we can't control, how do fear and control kind of work maybe against each other?
Well, when we experience the fear is an automatic primary emotion. So we have different types of emotions. We have primary emotions and we have secondary emotions. And fear is a primary emotion, and it's to keep us safe. It alerts us to danger. It alerts us to something. So you really don't have control of the stimulus that's coming into you that is alerting you to the danger. But it's important to listen to because it keeps you safe, keeps you alive.
So how do we know, when I looked at that definition of fear, it's impending danger, whether that danger is real or imagined. How do we differentiate between the two?
Okay, well, so let me go back a little bit about how the brain works without getting into too much of the brain, physiological stuff. But you have right brain and you have left brain, and the right brain has your emotions, and your left brain has logic and reason. And so when you have an incoming stimulus, your brain perceives it could be danger, either from a past experience or from a perceived future, don't know what's going on. And a lot of times, how we react to the fear is learned. So as a child, you could have seen how your mom or dad reacted to a unknown fear or a real fear. And so that becomes how you react. It's a good thing that it's taught, because that's how mammals learn, but it could also not be so good if it's gotten out of hand. So what we need to do is, when we get this stimulus into the emotional brain and the fear alarm goes off, it's first and foremost important to feel that feeling. You usually feel a tingly in your stomach, or you might feel It's usually in your stomach or in your chest. Sometimes it's in your throat. But you notice that sensation in your body, and you go, okay, what is that emotion? And you go, okay, that's fear, and then that's alerting me to something. Okay, so I name it, I identify it, and then I use the left side of the brain, which is the logic and the reason, and I go, okay, what's going on? Am I in imminent danger right now? So no, I am not. So let me go through reasoning of what's happening.
You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about recently my husband, he's an entrepreneur, and he's on his next big endeavor, and we've kind of put a time frame around it. And out of nowhere, I found myself having what I thought was heart issues. And then I developed blisters. I still have one around my mouth. And someone said, Jeanette, do you think you're stressed? Do you think? And I was like, no, no, no. But sometimes are we maybe afraid or fearful and we don't even realize it? Or maybe we're trying to talk ourselves out of it.
Yes, so if we don't want to feel an uncomfortable emotion, I don't like to call them good or bad emotions, because all emotions are good. They tell us something. So if it's an uncomfortable emotion, sometimes we try to push that down, and we push it down. And the thing with feelings is that they demand to be felt. So if you're not going to identify it and name it and kind of welcome it, it's going to come out in other ways. And we call that somatization. So it can come out in physical ways. It could be migraines. It could be a whole lot of stuff. So it's real important to identify it. And
So it sounds like I need to do what you said earlier. Take that right side of the brain
and reason
what I'm feeling, and then take it to the logical left side.
Yeah, and you did that when you said, okay, we're going to put a time frame on this. So that, this out of control feeling of, oh, what about this new business? You've actually put some control in it and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is for how long. So that helped, and you didn't even know it was helping. So that was an excellent tool.
And I got to control something,
know.
which puts me back in my happy place.
That's exactly right. And interesting, you said you felt anxious or stressed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting, because too much of a right brain emotion will bring upon anxiety. Too much of a left brain reasoning and logic will promote obsessiveness. So that's why it's very good to balance, so you don't feel anxious and you don't get obsessive. And fear is an energy. Fear is the energy in our body, and it's important to feel it without reacting to it. So you can say to yourself, I feel afraid, but I am not in danger in this moment. And it's interesting because there's chemicals in the brain that control our moods, they control our emotions, they control our perceptions, but they also control your immune system. So this is very crucial to understand and be aware of, because when a virus is going around, be it the flu, be it the coronavirus, a cold, it's important to have your immune system as healthy as possible.
So if you're worried about getting the coronavirus and stressed about it, and I'm not laughing because the coronavirus is funny, but I am laughing because really people have taken this to extremes sometimes.
Yes, it is. I mean, if you look at the statistics, the Surgeon General said today, 36% of the population has the potential of getting it. Well, then, okay, so here's my left side of the brain, 64% won't. So see how I did that?
And I don't think the media is talking about the 64%.
They want us to stay tuned, and so we're going to be hooked to the TV, which that I'll talk about tools of how to combat fear, and that's one of them. But it's interesting because I think he said that 80% of the people that acquire this virus will not need any medical attention. Wow. And then 90% of those will improve. And if you look at the flu statistics, just of this year, 20,000 people have died. So see how I'm using my rational, logical brain with these facts to combat this fear that I feel out of control that I might get something.
one of the many hats that I wear is event producer and director, and I have many fundraising events coming up. I mean, it's charity fundraising season for a lot of nonprofits. And so we are having to think very strategically and thoughtfully about, do they cancel their event, or do they maybe make it a virtual event instead of an in-person event? Not because we are feeling fearful ourselves, but there are a lot of people who are. And when I did some digging on the coronavirus, what I am reading is that there's just so much unknown about it. And I do think that sometimes, for me anyway, I can really trip myself up with fear of the unknown. So when I'm focused on what if instead of what is, I call that future tripping, and that's not a good trip for me because my mind goes all kinds of places.
Well, and so what you do is you know your facts. You know your risks. And so if you're in a large populated area, you're going to do what the CDC has said. You know, you're going to Perel, you're going to wash your hands a lot. You may even want to wear gloves or use a scarf to turn a doorknob. I've been having to visit the hospital recently, quite a few trips, and so I'm very careful. I don't touch anything. I wear gloves. I know they say a mask really doesn't help unless you're the sick one. Well, I might wear it anyway, you know, just in case some spit falls in my mouth. At least I'll be safe. It gives me a sense of control, even though it doesn't help. It feels like I am trying to combat it. And then you take your circumstances in consideration of where you are and what you're doing, and you follow the steps of what they're saying, you know, washing the hands, avoiding your face when you touch your face. You're avoiding touching that, which, you know, some of us girls are good at that because we don't want to mess our makeup up.
Right.
But, you know, sleep hygiene, you know, eat healthy, exercise, decrease your sugar intake because the sugar suppresses your immune system. So this would be a good time to say, I think I'll knock sugar off or something like that. And absolutely get the facts, but unplug from the media. Unplug from Facebook or just scroll past that. Don't even dive into that.
I think it's interesting that you said, you know, limit or reduce your sugar intake, because for me, I like to splurge with sugar. And so when I'm stressed or high anxiety, I think that maybe an extra scoop of ice cream will help me feel better. And then I'm dealing with a sugar hangover and a decreased immune system.
It has to do with those brain chemicals, that sugar craving.
Well, clearly, maybe I need some work with my brain chemicals.
I know your brain's doing just great.
But Tracy, when I hear you talking, you're very logical and I love that you were giving us some very practical ways to deal with fear and helping us understand it. How did this work for you when you were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer?
Yes.
Tell us about this experience.
That was a very strange, surreal moment. It was interesting because my father was in the steps of passing, and he was on hospice, and I was helping take care of him and probably not paying real attention to my body. And I just thought I had an ulcer or something. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense because I'm taking care of Daddy, and I'm sad that he's, you know, going to pass soon. And so I went to the doctor, and I had these symptoms of an ulcer. But she wasn't convinced. And so luckily a good doctor said, let's do some more testing. And so a couple weeks later and a couple of diagnostic tests, they came back and they said, it's pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
And the first thing I thought of course, was Alex Trebek. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And which was good because, my goodness, she's still here with us, and she's lived a good long life with it. So that was last July, and my immediate reaction was, of course, total denial and stunned, kind of like an outer body experience. And so it's just a numb. And then it was the fear. So I recognized it as fear. Oh my goodness, I could die. But then I also said I couldn't not die. And so I got the facts. Okay, what stage was it? Luckily, they found it at stage 1, which is absolutely unheard of. Usually it's a sleepy cancer and you find it at 3 or 4. And we found it at 1 because I'm attuned with my body and I knew some symptoms that just weren't right. And we caught it early and got the facts. Of course, Google searched pancreatic cancer, which is good because it gave me some information, but I also had to really balance it with, because I would hone in on those statistics of not surviving. And so then I would have to switch and go, but the other half or the other side is they do survive. This is the survival rate. So I had to really balance it with that. But gathering information, I didn't even know what a pancreas was and what it did. So, that was crucial. And so I gathered information and then proceeded.
And you proceeded, so you had surgery.
Yes, and the next thing was, do you do chemo first or you do this surgery? And the surgery is a pretty big surgery. It's called the Whipple. And they cut me from, my top of the rib cage all the way down below my belly button. And it's very much like open heart surgery. They take out every gut organ, so your gallbladder, your pancreas, your liver, your stomach, your colon, your small intestine, your large intestine. All of that gets taken out and disconnected. And they they cut the tumor off of the pancreas, and then they scrape all those organs. And then they hook those organs back together, and you cross your fingers that they all work. Well, it's interesting because I used one of the tools that is good for fear, and that is disassociation. It's a good disassociation. You go to a happy place. You go to a place in your mind in a relaxed state of maybe a beach that you've been to or the mountains, somewhere that you have experienced some very happy and comforting memories. And you go to that place and you imagine being there and you imagine what you want to happen. So part of my therapy is clinical hypnosis. And so this is a type of hypnosis. And so I use self-hypnosis a solid week before the Whipple surgery. And I called in some colleagues of mine that are also in the Hypnosis Society, the North Texas Society of Clinical Hypnosis. And I asked them to record things, disassociation, visual imagery things on my phone. And I listened to those for a solid week. And so going into surgery, I was really quite calm. And then you're asleep, and so you don't know anything's going on. And the images that I used were to when these organs would be touched, because the organs kind of have their own little brain, and they know, oh my goodness, something's touching me, and they, kind of react in fear as well. And so I would, basically talk to these organs and say, something's going to touch you, but it's a healing touch. And when you're reconnected, you will know exactly how to function again. Your body knows exactly what to do. And your body is actually made to live and made to heal. So, when you're facing these unknowns with the coronavirus, just be rest assured your body knows how to heal itself and it knows how to keep it safe. And so I get out of surgery, and I had 1.5 days of pain medication, and after that, didn't have any. I was up the first day, and
You're a champ.
the surgeon was actually quite amazed. In fact, I had a bowel movement at day 3, day 2 or 3, and by day 4, I was technically ready to go home. It's an 8 to 10 day hospital stay. And so by day 3, the doctor said, I cannot let you go. I mean, come on, it's
You
only
just
been
had
3
major
days.
surgery.
And so he said, we'll talk about it at day 4. So at day 4, he said, okay, you can go. And I had to confess to him what I had been doing, but using imagery and hypnosis, and he was quite impressed. I also used that through my chemotherapy. So after the Whipple surgery, they recommended me to do chemotherapy as a precaution to kill anything that might be lurking that we didn't see and that kind of thing. And I really didn't like that idea because, I was most concerned about my hair, but luckily it just got thin. Everybody kind of reacts differently, and it's a different chemo cocktail for every cancer, and so it's a little bit different for pancreatic cancer. And so every other week I went in for a 5-hour chemo infusion, and during that 5 hour, I used the disassociation. Another tool that I used was distraction. So I would use scripture memory, and I would use prayer. But it's interesting about memorizing anything keeps your mind on that loop of memorizing, and it keeps you off concentrating on a worry or a fear. Because as you know, when you learned the multiplication tables, it was you did it constantly, even in the car. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, and you over and over and over. And any millisecond that your mind is in limbo, it can revert to that old emotional brain and cause it to get anxious, or you could focus and push it back on that left brain and memorize something. So it could be a quote, it can be a scripture, it could be a prayer, it could be any of that. So disassociation or imagery is a tool that I used. Distraction. Another tool that I use and still use and use, it's just highly effective, is what's called diaphragmatic breathing. And diaphragmatic breathing is a very deep inner breath. So a lot of times when people say take a deep breath, you fill up just the top part of your lung. And so you go, and that's just actually a shallow breath. And so a deep diaphragmatic breath, if you're a singer or a musician, you know that you blow this belly up and when you inhale. And you can hold it a minute and then breathe out. So that's diaphragmatic breathing. And what that does is it actually tricks the brain. So when you are breathing in that deep way, it's very similar to an animal hibernating. And so there's no incoming threat when an animal is sleeping or hibernating. Now that short breath is the swimmer's breath or the runner's breath that athletes are taught to use, that short breath, and that signals to the brain something is running after you or you must run. And that's that very primal fear part of the brain. And so if when you're feeling a fear or anticipated fear, you can start that breathing right away, and it would trick the brain to say, okay, nothing is running after you. You are not in imminent danger right now, because there is no way you could run fast away from a threat in that big breath way. There's no way you could do it. You have to use that short breath. And so if you can learn to control the breath, that is huge. And I would use that. The other tool that I think is good to use is the inner talk that's going in your head. So, for example, I might get the coronavirus. Well, yes, and I might not. So there's, even after my diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, there is statistically numbers out there of the cancer coming back. Well, then I have to flip that and go, well, there's also this much chance that it won't come back. And so changing my inner thought actually changes that brain chemistry, changes that immune system, and it's one big cycle. So that's what, at least I can control that. I can't control if cancer is going to come or come back, or I can't control any of that. but there's certain of these little things that I can. So that inner talk is good. I can handle this one day at a time. I can handle this one step at a time.
And on that inner talk, even if you're not dealing with a health diagnosis, I see so many women, and I work with so many women that are so afraid of failure. And I do a lot of coaching around public speaking and or even media training. Well, what if I mess up? Well, that's that inner talk. What if you're successful beyond your wildest dreams?
And what if no one noticed?
Right, right. But we do. I think a lot of times we self-sabotage because of what we're telling ourselves because we are listening.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're right on about that.
yeah. Tracy, a little bit out of the clinical side of it, and I love specific tools, and I think these are going to work great in any situation. Where was your faith in all of this?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Faith is huge because whatever you believe in, a God or a universe or whatever it is, it must be something bigger than yourself. You can't be your own God. So whatever that is for someone, but for me, it's God. And I used prayer, and I used letting Him take my fear, and said, He's bigger than this fear, and I have to trust Him that He knows the best thing for me. Even if cancer comes back and I don't live to be 90, I'm going to trust that that's the best thing. I hope, but
And I think to go back to what we were talking about earlier with trust and control, a lot of times for me, it's hard to trust God because I so want to think that I need to control everything myself. And for me, trusting God means surrendering control to Him.
That's right.
Which is a tough thing.
It's exactly right.
Yeah. And I think something you mentioned earlier, really allowing yourself to feel the feeling. I have certainly been through periods in my life where I was mad at God, where I just even said, Lord, are you even up there? And I think that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. There were times where I felt like I couldn't pray, but if I identified why and what that emotion was about, it was anger. And I didn't want to come to Him with anger. Then I got over that and came to Him with anger. And really, it was anger of, not that it was happening to me, I was actually thankful that it wasn't my husband or it wasn't my children. I was glad it was me. But I was angry that it's not what I had thought my life was going to be like. I didn't think I'd get the big C. Everybody's scared of that. Or maybe not everybody, but, that is a concern.
Well, this has been so good today. And what I love, love, love is I heard many takeaways for you guys out there. So whether you are struggling with maybe fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, financial fears, health issues, particularly right now with the corona climate, I heard a couple of things. And so one, allow yourself to feel the feeling with that right side of the brain and then left side of the brain, apply logic to them. And get, really those two sides of the brain talking to each other. And then I also heard disassociation, healthy disassociation, because we could do a whole nother episode on unhealthy disassociation. I've done that at times in my life, but really that healthy disassociation. And then also thinking through what are some good distractions. Again, good distractions that would be helpful for you. And things like memorization. I know that even with my little 5-year-old son, we have him memorizing scripture. And so at night when he's like, I'm scared, what is that verse? Because we are trying to get that brain focused on good things. And one of the things that I have found in my life, and it's really not a tip for handling fear, it's just a tip for reframing things, is to focus on what we're thankful for and what we're proud of. And this is the way that we wrap every single day as a family. And so my son's going to say it for us, and then I'd like to ask you to do what you're thankful for and proud of with us, Tracy.
Well,
We want to hear from you what you're thankful for and what you're proud of.
So I am very thankful that I have received a 6-week checkup with no cancer. Yay. And I feel great, and I'm thankful that I feel great. And I'm thankful for being here. Thank you very much. I'm glad to help and to help others.
Yeah, and I am so grateful. TracyPaytonWatson.com. If you want to check out her, she's got a ton of resources, and she's also a licensed professional counselor. So, in the event you need someone to talk through, I am thankful for you being here. And this actually just happened because I saw her post. She had done a post about the waiting room, and it was really a metaphor for the waiting room of life. And I think when we're in periods of transition and of unknown, those can be really tough times. And these techniques that you gave us today are going to be great for whatever fear we are facing.
I used them.
Awesome. Do you have a closing piece of advice?
No, but I have a closing story. You may recognize this, but there was a Cherokee Indian, a grandson, that asked his grandfather about these two wolves. And one wolf represented evil, and the other wolf represented goodness. And as the grandfather was telling the grandson the story of these wolves constantly battling, the grandson would say, "Well, which one won? Which one won the battle?" And the grandfather said, "It's the one that you feed."
Ooh, that's good. Yes. That kind of reminds me of two acronyms for fear. One is false evidence appearing real. And so another way we can look at fear is face everything and rise. Which will you choose? Until next time, thanks for tuning in to Women of Excellence.